as devotees, so we can make progress in our process of developing our relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Dramati Murti Shukala Niyamena Tishtan Nanavatar Akaro Bhuvaneshu Kinchu Krishna Swayam Swamababat Paramam Pamanyo Govinda Maripurusham Tamaham Bhajami. This prayer from the Brahma Samhita glorifies the incarnations of the Lord, headed by Lord Ramchandra. And he is the principal incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The original Supreme Personality of Godhead is mentioned in many places throughout the Shastras, particularly in the Brahma Samhita. Ishwar Parama Krishna Sachit Ananda Vigraha Adir Govinda Sarvakarna Karmanam. Krishna is called the Adi Purush. He is the source of all existence, and from him all of the manifestations of the Godhead, all of the incarnations are coming. And the principal incarnation, as described in the Brahma Samhita, is Sri Ramchandra, who is the principal incarnation within the realm of the Vaikuntha section of the spiritual world. And his pastimes, activities, his personality, and everything about it have been glorified since time immemorial. And we find throughout the Asian world, and now spilled over into the Western world, the activities of this personality are becoming more and more popular as a topic of glorification, a means for celebration, and a way to go deeper into our own practice of Krishna consciousness. The life of, or the appearance and the manifestation of the activities that Lord Rama appeared when he came to this world more than 2 million years ago in the Treta Yuga. And many of these points are very significant in how we can advance in our spiritual life, both in what we should understand and do and apply, and what we should very carefully avoid. The Ramayana is deep in philosophical, analogous meanings, both spiritual and moral, of how to live life in this material world. We'll speak a little bit about the appearance of Sri Ram and what actually was the foreground for that appearance. And that's mentioned in Valmiki's Ramayana, also in Tulsidasa's Ramayana, and others. There are many versions of the Ramayana. These are the 2 prominent ones. Kumbi's Ramayana also is also very popular in South India and in many places around that area in South India. So we understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears in this world for many reasons, and Krishna speaks about those reasons in the Bhagavad Gita. In the 4th chapter, he says, Yada yadahi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhutanam adharmasya tadatmaham srijamyaham pavitranayam sadhunam vinasanaya chaduskritam dharma samstapanartayam sambhavami yuge, millennium after millennium, he comes to enact religious principles when they fall below standard. In other words, when irreligion becomes prominent in the world, then, and there is no solution, at least on the worldly level, then the Lord is petitioned to come and make the difference. In other words, only when he can solve the problems does he come. Otherwise, it is done by his representatives who act as his messengers in this material world to correct irreligion and reestablish religion. So, and as Prabhupada speaks about this particular verse, there are 3 points, and that is one, to eliminate the source of irreligion, you might say the demoniac population, or those who adhere to demoniac activities, and also to reestablish true religious principles when they fall below the standard, and people are suffering because of that. And 3, to give pleasure and to give his association to those who have dedicated their lives to his devotional service. So this particular incarnation we hear a lot about is eliminating irreligion. That seems to be the prominent theme throughout the particular narration of his life. It goes back 2 million years to a place called Ayodhya, which is still there in the subcontinent of India, where there was one particular king. His name was King Dasarat. King Dasarat was an ideal king. He had been living for hundreds of years and ruling in that area with undisputable rule. And that area of Ayodhya was 96 square miles, and it contained millions and tens and millions of citizens. And the atmosphere there was so, what we say, ideal. Now, see, I'll read a little bit. It was well laid out, beautiful, straight roads with perfume and scented water sprayed from trunks of intoxicated elephant. Every day, damsels from celestial planets hovered above it in their beautiful decorated airplanes and showered it with flowers. I'll read on. The archway gateways of Ayodhya were made of marble, and the gates were wrought with gold and silver embedded with precious jewels. The marketplaces were well planned, and 7-story houses symmetrically lined the streets, adorned with multi-story palaces and surrounded with exquisite gardens. Ayodhya resounded with the vibration of musical instruments, rivaling the abode of King Indra called Amaravati. Throughout the city, there were bards and singers reciting the glories of the personality of Godhead and danced out the pastimes of the Lord for everyone's benefit. And then it goes on. There's a large explanation of the city of Ayodhya and its glory, its undefeatableness, the quality of its citizen. They all followed the 4 principles of Artha, Dharma, Kama, and of course, eventually, moksha. There were the 4 Swadharmas were there, the Vaishyas, the Sudras, the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, all of that. It was an ideal place, as it says. They made King Indra's abode seem pale compared to Ayodhya. And the king was King Dasarat. King Dasarat had 3 wives, Kausalya, Sumitra, and Kaikeyi. There is other narrations which give a little bit broader understanding. At that time, Parasuram, the Supreme Lord, who was the incarnation of Shaktavesh avatar, to destroy irreligion in the form of kings who weren't qualified to rule, he came with his axe and he destroyed 21 um, generations of Kshatriyas who weren't qualified to be Kshatriyas. In other words, they were leading not for the benefit of others, but for their own aggrandizement and their own selfish interests. So the Lord appeared in this avatar called Parasuram. And Parasuram was always going from place to place, trying to weed out these Kshatriyas. And it said, now Ayodhya wasn't like that, but when Parasuram would come to the area, Dasarath would marry another queen. It says that Parasuram would never attack a place where a marriage ceremony was going on. So in order to protect himself from the wrath of Parasuram, Dasarath kept getting married. And it says in one narration of the Ramayana, he had 350 wives, not just three. But of course, in the standard narration by Valmiki, we hear of three. But after all of the glory and all of the success, the pomp, the riches, the supreme abode of Ayodhya, Dasarath was not happy. Although he had three wives, none of them could produce children. And so, and of course, after ruling for many hundreds of years, he was getting old, and it was time for him to retire from that rule and reestablish the next prince as ruler of Ayodhya. But there was no one lined up. So his mind was, what we say, disturbed. He was thinking, I have everything, but still, I have no son. And when a king has no son, how will he be able to continue his lineage? How will he be able to continue the rule of the city? Who will be qualified? So he approached his minister, Sumantra, and he had two, actually it was Vashishta, Vashishta, and he explained his dilemma. Vashishta reminded him that there was a kingdom nearby, the kingdom of Romapad, who at one time didn't have any heir either. And actually, Dasarath had one girl. Her name was Shanta. He did produce one girl from one of his queens, but in order to favor his friend Romapad, he gave his daughter to Romapad. And Romapad was happy. But Romapad, for whatever reason, his city was surrounded by drought. And he was also unhappy. To fast forward it a little bit, and Shanta wind up getting married to one great sage who was living in the woods his whole life, named Rishishringa. And this Rishishringa was very powerful because he had performed austerities his whole life. And after marrying Shanta, he joined the kingdom of Romapad. So Vashishta reminded Dasarath that actually, if you call your daughter and her husband, Rishishringa, and explain to Romapad what is the situation, then Rishishringa can perform a sacrifice, and from the benefit of that sacrifice, there will be the producing of an ingredient which will produce your next heir to the throne. So all that was arranged, and Rishishringa came. He performed the sacrifice. It was a yajna, and out of the yajna, there was a fiery personality who came out of the yajna, and he was holding a golden pot. He was black in color, surrounded by fire, And he presented the pot as the results of the sacrifice to King Dasarat. And it was explained by the ministers how to use that ingredient or that result from the sacrifice. It was called like a havasyana, or we might say something similar to sweet rice. And he said, you take this ingredient and you give it to your queens, and in due course of time, they will carry child. So he did, and he took half of it, he divided it in half, and took half and gave it to Koshalya. He took the other half and gave it to Sumitra, and then he took a portion of that half and divided again and gave a portion to Kaikeyi. And then he gave. So actually, Koshalya had half, Sumitra 1/4, and Kaikeyi had 1/4. So in due course of time, the ladies became full with carrying the children within their womb, and in a very auspicious moment, all the children were born, and there were 4 children who were named Ram, Lakshman, Bharat, and Sutrugna. 4 brothers with 3 different wives and 1 father, King Dasarat. But this manifestation of the sons of Dasarat and his queens was actually the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan, who appeared in 4 features as 4 weapons. We know from Shastra that the Lord carries weapons. Those weapons are conch shell, disc, club, and lotus flower. 2 for the devotees, 2 to eliminate irreligion or to destroy the demons. So these 4 personalities appeared. It's a very long and very sweet story in Kambi's Narayan, also in Valmiki's Narayan, of the growing up of these 4 children. And these 4 children became the cynosure of everybody in the kingdom. Dasarat was overwhelmed with joy, and he showered his affection on all of his queens. And from Koshalya, Ram and Lakshman were born. From Sumitra, Sutrugna was born. And from Kaikeyi, Bharat was born. 4 of them, they sort of paired off amongst themselves. Ram and Lakshman became very close. Bharat and Sutrugna became very close. And now the city was joyful, and soon the heir of the throne would be designated amongst the 4. Just to fast forward a little bit, as Ram was growing up, his father was giving him all of the knowledge he had in military arts and teaching him the values of how to live life according to the Manu Samhita and other scriptures. So this went on. So now we go to the age where the Lord Ram was 60. I'm going to have to put my phone on a charger for a minute, so just give me a break because I'm running out of battery power. So maybe you can say something, Gopal, in the meantime.
Thank you, Maharaj. Very beautiful narration. This is the appearance from.
It'll take me a minute just to hook up this charger, and then we can continue. Mhm. Mhm. All right. Okay. Okay. I think I'm hooked up. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, now we're getting a charge here. Continue. When Ram was 16 years old, a very illustrious sadhu, Kosika, also known as Vishwamitra Muni, came into the city, and he was concerned. He had heard about the birth of Ram. He was living in the forest as a Brahmin, and he was with many other great sages. But there was some disturbance caused by two prominent demoniac personalities named Subahu and Maricha, who would destroy the sacrifices of the sages and also cause great horror by trying to kill some of the sages. Vishwamitra came. He needed some guidance, some help, and he knew about the appearance of Ram. And then he was welcomed by Dasarat. Dasarat asked him, "How was your bhajan?" He said, "Not so good. My bhajan is right on my personal level, but we have a problem. I came for your assistance. You have two sons, Lakshman and Ram, and they are very powerful warriors." Of course, Dasarat didn't see it like that. "And I need them. I will take them into the forest, and I need them to help eliminate these demons who are causing havoc." Dasarat was shocked, thinking the boys are only 16 years old. They're such young kids. They've never had any outside combat with anyone. And now he's asking for my sons to kill powerful demons. So he protested the request. But then Vishishta, the priest of Ayodhya, told Dasrat, you should comply with his request. Do not worry, Ram will be fine. So, taking the words of his spiritual master on his head, he accepted it reluctantly, but still he accepted. And off they went. And of course, it explained that Ram came to the area, and with one arrow, he shot Subaha and killed him immediately. And with another arrow, he hit Maricha and knocked him 800 miles into the ocean. So both of the demons were one was out of commission, the other one was destroyed. Around that same time, Kosika, or when we say Vishwamitra Muni, traveled with Ram in different places. And of course, they wound up in the city of Mithila, where Janaka, the great king, who was also very powerful and had an unrivaled kingdom also, he was also uh, on the level of the demigods in his rule. And he had four wonderful daughters, headed by one who was Sita. He had made a vow that he happened to come in contact with Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva donated his bow to his kingdom. That bow was kept into a glass case, and he made a proclamation as a way to find a suitable marital partner for his daughter, Sita Devi. And so he said any king who could come and pick up and string this bow would be a suitable candidate for my daughter. It was a proclamation that was practically impossible because the bow was Shiva's personal bow, Lord Shiva, Mahadev, practically on the same level as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Many suitors came, you might say persons who were adventurous to give it a try. Even the powerful Rakshasa king Ravana came, and he failed to pick up and string the bow. So Janaka was kind of being criticized for making it impossible for his daughter to find a suitor, but he stuck with his vow. Of course, Kosika could understand the power of Ram and Lakshman, so they came. It's a beautiful story. I was reading it just a couple of days ago in the Tulsi Ramayana. Tulsidas does a beautiful, beautiful analogy with many, many ornaments of lankaras describing the beauty of the kingdom, the beauty of Sita and all of her qualities, Ram, and they're coming together and meeting each other. And eventually, after Sita saw Ram, she was hoping that he would be the person that it would pass the test. Of course, everyone in the kingdom thought, these two young boys, one is dark and one is light, they're so young. How will they be able to pick up the bow? What to speak of stringing it? But of course, they weren't aware of who Sri Ram and Lakshman were. And as the story goes on, Sita was praying in her heart that Ram would be the person that she could, live her life with. And of course, and it says it's described, it's so beautifully described in Tulsi's Ramayana, that Ram very effortlessly picked up the bow, strung it, and when he pulled it back, it broke in half. And the sound of the cracking of the bow shattered throughout the universe. So much so that elephants, who were the cardinal guardians of the directions, they were shaking on their feet, and people from all over the universe were falling down. It was such a loud sound. And everyone in Mithila was cheering that this young boy, the sinister of the eyes of everyone, became the husband. Of course, the marriage ceremony took place a little bit later. But part of that, before the marriage ceremony took place, one personality arrived on the scene, and he was quite disturbed, and that was Parasaram. He was insulted that Shiva's bow was broken, and he became angry and started to speak in that way. And then there's a dialogue between him and Lakshman, where Lakshman is kind of challenging him in so many ways, and Parasaram is getting angrier and angrier and angrier, threatening to take his axe and destroy Lakshman on the spot. Lakshman continues. Finally, Ram, in a very sweet way, enters into the conversation, pacifies Parasaram by glorifying him, and Parasaram was so overwhelmed with the words of Ram that he gave him his bow. But when he went to give him his bow, he held the bow out, and the bow automatically left the hands of Parasaram and went into the hand of Ram. When Parasaram saw what was happening, he understood this personality is not an ordinary personality. He offered his obeisances and then went to the woods and performed austerities. Everything was clear, and then the marriage took place. And then there was an announcement to give information to Ayodhya that the marriage would take place. And then there was a party of Dasarat and many of the leaders of the Ayodhya kingdom, along with Satrughna and Bharat. They came, and this is described in page after page after page after page of the welcoming, the facilities, how they were taken care of, the love between the kings, and the glories of Vishwamitra Muni as he orchestrated everything perfectly for the arrangement of this marriage. And of course, the marriage happened, and 4 daughters married 4 personalities. I can't remember all of the names, but Lakshman married he married Urmila, and Satrughna married Shrutakirti, and Mandavi married Bharat, and it was glorious. And of course, they stayed many days after celebrating the wedding. Everyone was overwhelmed with happiness. Finally, Dasarat decided to return to his kingdom when he got back, and he announced what had happened, and the whole kingdom of Ayodhya was overwhelmed with joy, and they start glorifying Dasarat in so many ways. All of the mothers of the boys now had their desires fulfilled. All of their sons had beautiful and qualified wives, and they were all living back in the area of Ayodhya. This went on for so many years. And of course, after some time, the Dasarat one day was looking in the mirror, and he was noticing some gray hairs appearing on his head. And he was thinking, I am now getting old. How long will I be able to maintain this body before it will drop? So I must make proper arrangements for the next prince to take over the kingdom. And I want to do that before I leave this body. And so he understood that the person who was the most qualified and loved by all of the citizens was the eldest of all the boys, Ram. He was considered the eldest, and therefore, because he was the eldest, he was the prince regent, or the heir to the throne. This was announced amongst the citizens, but Vashishta Sumantra gave the word to all of the citizens of Ayodhya. Everyone had a celebration, just announcing how now Ram would be the next prince regent, and Dasarat would be able to retire. There was so much joy, happiness, pomp, and the kingdom. Everyone was giving gifts to each other. Celebrations were going on just in preparation of the coronation of the king. It was just glorious. As you read the Ramayana, you start to fall in love with every one of the personalities, because they have so much love for each other and so much appreciation for each other, and so much happiness is being exuded when they see the success of their lives manifested through these 4 personalities, especially Sri Ram. So this went on, but then again, there is always the shadow of darkness that somehow creeps into something that is wonderful. We see that in life. Sometimes life is going on so nicely, and we are getting all our desires fulfilled, and things are moving according to our plans for success in life. But then all of a sudden, a ray of inauspiciousness enters and changes everything around. And eventually, that's what happened. And what happened was Kaikeyi although she was the youngest queen, she was the most favored by Dasarath, and he would spend much time with her. And he would see her every evening. He would come to her chamber and spend time with her. He was the favorite. She was the youngest. She had saved his life in a battle many years ago when he was wounded on the battlefield. And she came and saved his life and nursed him back to health. He was grateful for her service, and he offered her two boons. She could ask anything she wanted, and he would immediately grant it. She said she thanked him for his generosity, but she said, I will take those boons in due course of time. So, of course, time went on, and that sort of lingered in the background. Now, Kaikeyi, she unfortunately had a maidservant named Mantara. Mantara was a hunchback elderly lady who assisted Kaikeyi. Well, Mantara was somewhat what we say Rita Gyan. She didn't have good knowledge, and she had a streak of envy in her also. And she started to feel unhappy when she was hearing how Ram was going to take the throne. What was the reason for her unhappiness? Well, she was thinking, my master, Kaikeyi, will now be relegated to a lesser position because the mother of Ram, who Ram will be the next regent, is Kaushalya, and therefore Dasarath will put all his favor, time, and energy and affection on Kaushalya and neglect my master, Kaikeyi, and that means I will be marginalized. In other words, I will be ousted also. So she was thinking of her own selfish interest. And so she devised a plan. And it's when you just read about how she thought about that plan, it's really devious how she used very sweet and very ambiguous words in order to bring about a change in Kaikeyi's attitude. Kaikeyi loved Ram just as much as she loved her own son Bar, even more so. And it was known throughout the kingdom. She loved Ram as everyone loved Ram, the most out of all of the boys. He was just everyone's well-wisher, everyone's source of happiness. And so using what we say, uh, what's the word? Insidious statements clothed in a very, what we say, nice, very ornamented language that sounded like praise, but actually there was something else. So she started to say, Kaikeyi, why are you so happy? Don't you know what's happening? Kaikeyi was bewildered. What do you mean? Can't you see it? It's happening right in front of your eyes. Mantara, what are you talking about? You're blind to your own future. Can't you see? What don't I see? Well, Ram tomorrow will be coronated as Prince Regent. Yes, that is wonderful. Everyone will celebrate it. I am very happy. Mantara started to exude her poison by saying, don't you know what that means? What will happen to you? You will no longer be favored by Dasarath. You'll be relegated to a lesser position, if any position at all, because Kausalya is the mother. And actually, Kausalya she is envious of you because Dasarath spends so much time with you as opposed to being with her. And then she went on to narrate how co-wives have a tendency to be envious of each other. She cited many examples. And she made Kaikeyi think that Kaushalya was very much against her and didn't favor her at all, and wasn't at all pleased with her being the favorite queen of Dasara. Of course, it wasn't true, but this is sophistry. You can take something that has some element of truth and turn it into something completely opposite. But in this case, it wasn't sophistry, it was out and out lie. And then she started to speak. Then once, you know, once Ram becomes king, then Bart won't have any position, and Bart we know is more qualified than Ram. And she started to glorify Bart, the son of KKK. And why do you think Bart is not here? Because Ram sent him away to his parents' kingdom, his relatives' kingdom, so he wouldn't be here for the coronation. Actually, he is the rightful heir to the throne. He is the most qualified. So Kaike's listening to all of this and she's bewildered. What are you talking about? And then Mantara, using devious language, she continued to spew out her thoughts. And this is interesting, not interesting, but it's very instructive, you might say, that it says, tell me who you associate with, and I'll tell you who you are. Association is the foundation for developing in our Krishna consciousness, or you might even say in life in general. People associate according to how they can gain in their own life's interests. And so her association was someone who was actually against her own interest, and she was poisoning her. Even though Kaikeyi loved Ram even more than her own son, Mantara changed it all around and saying that Ram knows that Bart is the most qualified, therefore he sent him away. And when he comes back, he'll be put in jail and punished by Bart when Ram becomes king, because he is envious of Bart. And she was making up all of these lies. And then she said, and at the same time, we understand that actually Bart is actually more qualified to rule than Ram, and she gave so many reasons. So Kaikeyi, she lent a sympathetic ear to listen, and gradually her mind became puzzled and she became bewildered. And she said to Mantar, what should we do? Mantar said, don't you remember that Dasarat had given you two boons? Now the time is to use those boons. Tell Dasarat you want to use those boons. And the first one is you want Bart to be king instead of Ram. And because if Bart becomes king and Ram is still here, Ram will organize his armies and try to fight against Bart. So send Ram to the forest for 14 years. This bewildered Kaikeya even more. She somewhat accepted the fact that, okay, maybe my son should be the king. I can use the boon to make that happen. Why send Ram to the forest? And then she explained that Ram is envious of Bart, and then there'll be war within the kingdom, and then no one will be, and then you'll be considered to be the cause of the war. So, okay, and then he was finally convinced. So again, association can cause us to go up and succeed in fulfilling our desires in life. Accordingly, or association can take us to hell. So therefore, the scriptures very strongly enjoin that one should avoid that association which is contrary to our best interest. And Rupa Goswami, in Nectar of Instructions, mentions in two verses, one verse describing the things that are beneficial for our practice of Krishna consciousness, and the six things that are unbeneficial. And in both of these six delineations, he mentions avoidance of non-devotee association and rejection of non-devotee association in two different verses. And so, as in Srila Prabhupada also speaks about association, he says, when someone asks Prabhupada, what is the most important thing in the practice of Krishna consciousness? Prabhupada said, association with devotees. And he mentions it 3 times to emphasize the point. Because when you say something 3 times, there's no question of any other consideration. That becomes the rule or the standard by which we live by. And so this association, and therefore, the power of bad association was inflicted upon Kaikeyi, which changed her to a loving person, into a someone who was now conniving to destroy the kingdom. So after that happened, that same evening, of course, Mantara said, we have to act fast because tomorrow is the coronation day. So go into your sulking chamber. The ladies have this place where when they feel unhappy, they go there. And so when Dasarat came to see Kaikeyi that evening, she wasn't in her place. And then he found out she was in the sulking chamber. He went to see her. She was laying on the floor dressed in ragged clothes, and she seemed very unhappy. And then Dasarat tried in a very loving way find out what was the cause of her happiness and offered to give her whatever she needed to bring her back. But finally, she told him the whole situation, and then he was shocked. He was not only shocked, he was bewildered. It says he put his hands to his head, closed his eyes, and it felt like his head was being struck by a thunderbolt when he heard her request based on those 2 boons that he had promised to give her. She used it against him. And now he did everything to persuade her from this heinous plan of hers, but she was immovable. She had been poisoned. She had completely changed her attitude. And Dasarat was besides himself in anguish. And of course, this went on, and finally Dasarat was practically, of course, she told him, and she used very strong logic, saying that great personalities have to undergo great austerities in order to achieve. And she mentioned Didachi, who gave his bones for Indra so they could create a weapon to kill Vitrasura. She mentioned Sibi, who was tested by the demigods because he was very generous. And one pigeon came and took shelter of Sibi. And then one heron came to eat the pigeon, but Sibi protected the pigeon. And the heron said, you have to give me my share. This is my share. And Sibi said, well, I'll give you myself in relationship to the weight of the pigeon. So they put the pigeon on the scale, and they put Sibi on the other side. But still, even though Sibi wasn't able to balance the weight of the pigeon, because the pigeon actually was one of the demigods in disguise, they were testing Sibi, and Sibi said, well, I'll give you my whole life. And of course, when he came to that point, and then they revealed him. So she was mentioning that great personalities will perform great sacrifices for the benefit of others. So you should do that also, King Dasarat, because the benefit is that Bharat should rule the kingdom and Ram should go to the forest. Of course, he couldn't speak. And finally, the word spread around of what happened. And then the word got back to others. And then the word also came to Ram. When Ram heard his father was overwhelmed, but he went to see him, and then he told him the whole situation. Your mother, Kaikeyi, has changed everything. Well, she wants Bart, and she wants you to go to the forest. Dasarat was criticized for accepting her boons, but as a king, she kept chiding him, saying that, when a Kshatriya makes a promise, he should going back on the promise is worse than death. You will have no fame, you will have no glory, you will be criticized for not keeping your word. And she convinced him otherwise. But others were saying, no, you shouldn't listen to Kaikeyi. She's polluted, she's evil, she's acting against Dharma. But he was bewildered. When Ram heard that, he came to see his father. Seeing his father in a pitiable condition, he eventually found out the reason. And then he said, my dear father, it is the duty of the son to obey the orders of the father. Therefore, if it is your will, I will also go to the forest. But you have to understand one thing. This whole thing is orchestrated on a higher level, because Ram's banishing in the forest was the arrangement of the demigods. So Ram could leave the kingdom and eventually come and destroy this evil king Ravana, who was causing havoc throughout the area. So, and also attacking the demigods. So, on a higher level, this was ordained by providence that this situation would unfold in such a way that Ram would be forced to leave the kingdom. When everyone heard that Ram was going to leave and there was no coronation, people became unhappy, overwhelmed, finding out the reasons, criticizing Kaikeya, also criticizing Dasarat for acting the way he did. But Ram was sober. Ram was a person that he would always maintain sobriety. In happiness and distress, he was unmoved. He was fixed on duty and on Dharma. And so he was unmoved by the situation, and he understood allegiance to one's parents is the duty of the children within the family. Of course, we don't follow that anymore today, but that is actually the understanding. And the Bhagavad Gita explains that one should be respectful to seniors, including one's parents. Of course, that's a big subject. But nowadays, of course, there are many stories which illustrate how that is no longer in place anymore, where children don't appreciate their parents nowadays and find reasons to go away and disobey their parents and go on to their own, and many times fall into bad association and wrong ways in life because they have rejected good counsel coming from their parents. It's not an ideal situation, but this is what happens, at least in Kali Yuga. Now we're back to Treta Yuga. And now when it was understood, Ram was there, and then Lakshman found out, and Lakshman said, I am going into the forest also. I cannot be separated from my brother. So Ram accepted the fact that Lakshman wanted to go with him. But then Sita, when she heard about it, she was devastated that my husband is now leaving, going to the forest. How can I live without him? It is not possible. So Ram had commissioned some tree bark so he could wear it and prepare himself for the forest attire. And he was making his final farewell to all of the family members and members of the palace and many of the senior royal citizens. And Sita arrives on the scene and says, my dear husband, I'm going to go with you. Ram wasn't at all happy with that idea. He said, the forest is not a place for you, oh gentle lady. You're accustomed to luxury and lavishness, soft beds, fine clothing, the best of all foods. How will you live in the forest? It'll not be possible. It is cold. It is dark. There are many dangers in the forest from Rakshasas. There's no food out there. There's only roots and berries and fruits coming from the tree. How will you live? And he tried to dissuade her in so many ways, but she wasn't moved by his statement. This is interesting how her allegiance to her husband was so strong that she was willing to accept difficulty just to be with her husband. Again, here's another principle of that the wife follows the husband in all situations, no matter what, and stays faithful and chaste to her husband. And the husband takes good care and does everything that he can to guide the wife, to nourish her and what she needs, and to take care of her both spiritually and materially. And so Sita was the epitome of a chaste wife. But Ram was not so happy. So finally, she made a statement. She said, Ayodhya, without you, my dear Ram, is like the forest, and the forest with you is like Ayodhya. So she was determined. And so Ram reluctantly fulfilled her wish to come. And now they leave for the forest. And of course, the Ramayana describes their adventures in the forest, so many demons that Ram had to deal with, and so many dangerous situations, fighting with many of the forces of Ravana and destroying them, keeping Sita safe from all of this. So this story goes on and on and on, but I'm going to mention a few. It's not possible to narrate this whole Leela, and nor am I qualified to bring in all of the glory of such a narration. But I'll mention a few of the messages that we can get from this particular Leela, which are both in the principle of morality, civility, and spirituality. One was the power of bad association, and I'll read something. It was known fact that in Ayodhya, Kaikeyi loved Ram more than her own son Bharat. Then how could she become so evil? It was by the bad association of Matara. Attachment to service and not to position. Interesting. Lord Ram was willing to become the king as a service to Maharaj Dasarath, and he was also willing to go to the forest as a service to his same father. So he took service over position, and his service to his father reigned supreme. Even extreme reversals, if taken in the proper spirit, will help us fulfill our mission in life. The law of gravity is only in effect in the Earth's spheres and not beyond. So also laws of material nature act only in material consciousness, not in spiritual consciousness. So Therefore, reversals in life, and this is very important to understand as devotees. Sometimes we see reversals as reversals or obstacles or blockades in fulfilling our desires or becoming Krishna conscious. But actually, for one who is seriously engaged in devotional service, there is no such thing as obstacles or reverses. All of these apparent obstacles, reverses, blockades, are actually what we say opportunities in disguise to further and to go deeper into our practice of Krishna consciousness. By seeing how to use this obstacle to become greaterly devoted to our worshipful Lord, Sri Krishna, by taking shelter of the Lord, by gaining some knowledge of what is happening and how to use it for our service. There are many examples where reverses in life have become the opportunities that one achieves a success in life. So you see here, apparent reverses brought about success in the sense that the mission of the Lord actually unfolded because of these reverses. Otherwise, without this reverse, how will that mission unfold? And what was his mission? To act on behalf of the demigods and destroy the evil in the form of Ravana, who was permeating the world with irreligion and suffering. So there are many things we can learn from this. I'll read a few more of the possible ways we can gain from. We have many examples of how Hanuman, he had to jump across the ocean in order to find Sita. We all know that about as we read the Ramayana, and how he worked through those obstacles and eventually achieved his result. He was able to find Sita, and by finding Sita, he alerted Ram, and by alerting Ram, Ram came with all his armies, and of course, the battle of Lanka took place, where Ravana was eventually destroyed. There's other messages also in this great Leela. When Ram was in Chitrakoot, he met one of the greatest of all sages named Augusta Muni. Augusta Muni was so powerful, such a powerful sage. He's one of the most powerful sages in existence. He actually drank an ocean of water when some demons hid themselves in the bottom of the ocean. In order to unroot these demons, he drank up the whole ocean, so the demons were exposed and eventually destroyed. So that same Augusta Muni, he met Ram. They spoke on many spiritual topics. And Augusta Muni wanted to offer Ram something. He said, I will give you something that you will need it in the most difficult time in your life. And he gave him an arrow. He said, this arrow is as powerful as a Brahmastra weapon. When you find yourself in the most dangerous situation, only, do not use it before then, but only in the most life-threatening situation, you may resort to this arrow. Of course, we fast forward when the battle between Ram and Ravana was going on. Ram was shooting arrows, and they was cutting off the heads of Ravana. But every time his head was cut off, we know Ravana had 10 heads. Another head was growing back, and he couldn't kill Ravana. And Ravana was becoming more and more powerful as the fight was going on. So at one point, he remembered that arrow. So he took that arrow from his quiver and placed it on his bow. As soon as he did that, the whole earth shook. And when he pulled it back, he pulled it back in such a way that the bow was at its extended, and demons and monkey soldiers who were assisting Ram, they were all falling to the ground with the force of that arrow. When he let that arrow go, it was like a speedy dart, more like a comet flying through the sky. It went into the heart of Ravana, came out the other side, went around the earth, came back, and went back into the quiver of Ram. And that was the weapon that actually destroyed Ravana. And it's mentioned that the instructions of the spiritual master are the life and soul of a devotee in the success in devotional service. So Augusta Muni, presenting himself as the spiritual master of Ram, and Ram accepting him in that role, followed that instruction, and therefore, when the time came, he used that arrow, which was the instructions. So we become fixed in our devotional service. We become advanced in our devotional service. We reach perfection in our devotional service when we make the instructions of our spiritual master our life and soul. Because the life and soul of the spirit, the words of the spiritual master are the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, coming through his representative, who is the mercy manifestation in this material world to guide us back to our home in the spiritual world. So, therefore, the most important thing in the life of a devotee is the instructions of the spiritual master. How to understand them, how to apply them, and how to gain the benefit from that application. So, this is the example of how Augusta Muni actually, in the role of a guru, gave Ram what he needed in the most difficult time when he was unable to stop Ravana. Another, when I'm going to jump from place to place throughout the Ramayana to bring about some examples that we could use in our own practice of Krishna consciousness. When the monkeys, along with with Ram and Lakshman, Hanuman were all there, they were at the shore of the ocean, and it was 800 miles across, and there were millions of monkeys about to attack the city of Lanka. But how to get across? And so they would have to build a bridge. But how can you build a bridge on top of an ocean? So there's two things. There's two very interesting pastimes during this particular part of the Leela, wherein Hanuman was throwing big boulders to build the bridge, and one squirrel, some people say spider, some say squirrel, wanted to help. He wanted to assist the Lord by serving. So he was kicking grains of sand into the ocean. And Hanuman was looking, and this squirrel is just getting in the way. I might even step on him. So he said, "Move aside, squirrel. This is man's work," in so many words. And he told the squirrel, you're not doing anything. Sit back. So Ram noticed that, and he chastised Hanuman by saying, "Hanuman, he's doing as much as you are doing. You are working to your capacity. He is working to his capacity. Therefore, both are serving perfectly." So this is a very important principle in devotional service. What is our qualification in devotional service? Our desire to serve. That is our qualification. And whatever we need may be supplied by the Lord or may not be. But still, we have to make our desire to serve strong. And by that desire, then the Lord is pleased, and then we act. And whether our service is considered to be what we say great in the eyes of others or not so great in the eyes of others, it's service. There's a story in the Christian tradition where Christ, we'll just divert to another tradition for a moment because there's many messages in Christianity, which is also very important in our own practice of devotional service. Christ had gone to a gathering of groups of people who came to be with him. And there was one poor lady who came. There were other persons who were quite wealthy. And one person gave Christ a very big financial gift. Now, one lady was there. She wanted to offer something, but she didn't have anything. In fact, she didn't even have enough finances to take care of herself day to day for food. But still, her heart was moved. So she came and she offered a few pennies to Christ. The persons who offered big amounts of finance were somewhat looking at her and saying, what can he do with that? It's nothing. Christ picked up on it and he said to these people who were feeling unhappy because this lady was offering very little. And he said to them, she's doing as much as you're doing. You're giving to your capacity. She's giving to her capacity. Therefore, both of you are serving nicely. So again, it's not so much what qualifications you have on the material level. It is what is your desire to please and serve the Lord accordingly. And of course, if that desire becomes strong, Krishna facilitates the needs that we have in order to make our service offerable to the Lord. So this is a very important point. So when they were throwing boulders into the sea, in many cases the boulders were not floating. So Ram started to write his name on each of the boulders. And then when they threw the boulder into the sea, the boulder was floating. So the holy name of the Lord is actually the success in the execution of our devotional service, the success in action. In other words, as it's explained, that there are no more greater forms of worship than to chant the glories of the Lord by chanting his holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we have Ram's name there also in the Maha Mantra. Some people say it refers to Sita Ram. Others say it refers to Radhika Raman, which is Krishna. Prabhupada acknowledged it's based on the mood of the chanter. If they see it as Sita Ram, yes. If they see it as Radhika Raman, fine. But it's the name of the Lord, and therefore it's glorious. So when we chant the holy names of the Lord, we're offering the Lord the means for self-realization back to him in the form of his holy name. How does he gain for us chanting his name and offering to him? We might use the analogy or the comparison where people go to the Ganges in different places in India and they want to worship the Ganges. So they go to the Ganges and with a palmful, they scoop up a palmful of water and they offer prayers to the Ganga and pour back the water while they're offering the prayer. So what does Ganges have to do with how can she gain from her own water? So in the same way, what does God gain from hearing his own name offered back to him? It is for our benefit. It purifies our heart, Cheto Darpana Marjanam, awakens our love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is an ocean of unlimited happiness and undam buddhi vardhanam. It is the means for self-realization in this age. So chanting the holy names of the Lord is the highest principle of worship within the process of pure devotional service. This is glorified by many of the acharyas, especially Yamaraj, who speaks this same information to his followers, the Yamadutas, by saying, out of all of the activities in human society, the highest activity is to worship the Lord in devotion. And out of all of the activities in devotional service, the highest and most glorious is to chant the holy names of the Lord. So, yeah, big or small, we can swim across the ocean of birth and death by chanting the holy names of the Lord. Okay, so perhaps I can stop here and see if we have some questions, comments, further discussions on Ram Leela.
Hare Krishna. Wow. It was such a wonderful class, Maharaj. Thank you so much. Such amazing lessons and meanings that you shared with us. If someone would like to...
Prabhupada's mercy.
Yes. We have about 60 families on the Zoom call. So I want to give as many people an opportunity. So please keep your questions short, and we will just go by that. Vinita Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I mean, we have heard Ramayana and we have read so many times, but the way you translated was really different and really a lot of questions is there in my mind, but in the interest of time, I'll just ask one quick question. Prabhu, since Lord Rama himself was the avatar of Vishnu, the Godhead, why did he underwent the formal education under sage Vashishta, to become the master of the Vedas? Why did he had to go through that despite being the avatar of Lord Vishnu?
Well, in each of his incarnation, the Lord plays a particular role. Just like when Lord Krishna came as Lord Chaitanya, he played the role of a devotee of the Lord. Although he was the Supreme Lord, he acted as the role of the devotee to teach from that position how to worship the Lord. In the same way, Ravana had a benediction that he could not be killed by any beast, any god, or anyone. But when it was put to him, human beings, he considered human beings so puny that compared to the Rakshasa race, what human being could cause him difficulty? So it would be an insult for him to accept that benediction. So he didn't take it. So that was the loophole that was needed to kill Ravana, that the Lord came as a human being, and therefore he acted in the role as a human being. So that's the reason. He acted like the dutiful son of his father. He acted like a person who needed training in growing up in both knowledge and in chivalry. In other words, he became a student, although he was the master.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Yeah, that was only to kill Ravana. That was done in that way.
Yeah.
Nina Mataji.
Thank you for that question. That was a good question.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj, my humble obeisances at your lotus feet. So good to hear from you again, Maharaj. And what you said that in Kali Yuga, it's Guru's instructions comes to us as mercy of Krishna. It's so wonderful to hear. Maharaj, I always had pondered on one question about towards the end of Ramayana when Sita Devi requests the Mother Earth to open up and she devours herself. I mean, she really goes down beneath. I'm still trying to understand the. If you could kindly shed some information that how can I understand that? I mean, we understand that yes, there was again another challenges, and I'm trying to understand the mindset of Lord Rama here, or what happened, and Mother Sita as well.
You mean why Ram had disowned her and sent her to the ashram of Valmiki
No,
Muni?
no, not that. That is clear that it's not like, I mean, that was basically for Mother Sita's protection, and she wasn't really abandoned. She was under the supervision of the sages there. That was, in fact, when Sita Devi was brought back to the kingdom, the way Sita Devi ended her life, like she asked the Mother Earth to open up, and then she went inside. That is the part I'm still trying to understand.
Well, the manifestations or the incarnations of the Lord leave in different ways that are unexplainable.
Mm.
Ram, he went to the Sarayu River, and he merged himself into the river, and he was gone. Balaram, when he left, he brought a snake coming out of his head, and then he entered into that body. Of course, he's an Anandashesh, and that's how he disappeared. So the disappearance of the Lord, look, in Krishna also was very bewildering. How he supposedly was shot in the foot by a hunter, and he died because of that, which is not possible. Even an ordinary person doesn't die by getting shot in the foot. So the disappearance of the great personalities remain a mystery to us. Some explanations are given. I don't have an explanation for why it happened in the way it did, but there you might have to do a little further research to see why she is Sita Devi, and therefore there is also the different energies of the Lord in the female form come in three. One is called Bu, one is called Kripa, and one is called Sri. She belongs to one of these three energies. So the Bu energy is the earth energy. So that may be the reason why it was chosen that she leave into the earth, going back to her original energy form. Bu energy, the Creep energy, and the Shri energy are the three manifestations of the female counterparts of the Lord who appear with the Lord as his consort in their different leelas. So that's as much as I can say. All I know is that there may be some connection with the earth.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Yeah, you have to do further research on that one.
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to see you one more time in the same week. Hare Krishna.
Hari Hari. That was yesterday, huh?
Actually,
2 days
day
ago.
before. Yeah,
Mm.
day before I was so blessed. Thank you so much, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Sachin Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, and please accept my humble obeisances. It was really wonderful to hear such a big scripture, and you just narrated it in such a short time, and it was really beautiful to get some learnings out of it as well in such a short duration. My question, Maharaji, is basically about the association. The Kekai and Mantra example that you gave. So I was just thinking, Maharaj, like, there are certain associations which are outside, which I can choose, but there are certain associations which are given to me by birth, like even Kekai was, with Mantra from a long time and her, caretaker. So is it basically, how do we decipher between a good association and a bad association when you have friends all together all of your life, and then they can even change your mind as well, and you think that they're your good friends. So I just want your your guidance on that.
Well, I guess the bottom line is whatever furthers our knowledge and our practice of Krishna consciousness, we should seek out that association. And whatever takes away from that, we should avoid. When association is unavoidable due to relationships that have been established, maybe in family life or in work life, then Prabhupada describes the definition of association. He says association means affection for. So when we find someone has a whole different lifestyle, values, and we still have to interact with them, we interact only for the purpose of that reason we come together, and never open up our personal life nor go into their personal life. That's where the affection develops. So keep it very formal, keep it friendly, but don't go any further in your revealing your thoughts or your minds or your heart to non-devotees, basically. That should only be done with devotees.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It really helps.
And I hope that was helpful.
Kapil Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj, first of all, I'd like to thank you for this wonderful katha and so many instructive lessons from this katha. Really grateful. Maharaj, I just had one question, which I was contemplating on Dashrath Maharaj's point. You mentioned that when Vishwamitra Muni came to take Ram and Lakshman with him, and Maharaj Dashrath was reluctant to give those boys away. But on the order of his spiritual master, he, even though reluctantly, he gave away Ram and Lakshman to Vishwamitra. So Maharaj, my question is, we as conditioned souls in Kali Yuga, we have this rebellion in our heart that I want to do as I want instead of obeying our spiritual seniors or spiritual masters. So Maharaj, what is the solution to that kind of attitude and rebellion?
Don't do it. We take advice from seniors, we take advice from well-wishers, we take advice from people who are qualified. So there's where we should seek advice. And when it comes to situations where it doesn't apply to spiritual practice, we can gather advice which will help us make a decision. We shouldn't act independent. Just like, for instance, there's three kinds of leaders. There's the leader who takes advice from his ministers, those who he puts in place to give advice, and he follows. There's those leader who take advice from their ministers, but then he considers whether he should follow or not. And that was Ravana. Ravana was like that. Ravana would ask advice from his ministers, and if he liked it, he took it, and if he didn't like it, he rejected it. But he always asked advice. And then there's the leader who doesn't ask for any advice and just does whatever they want to do based on their own understanding and their own ideas. So when it comes to our personal life, when it comes to spiritual practices, we should get advice from people who are in the position to give advice, such as our spiritual master or even the god brothers of our spiritual master, which are seen by the disciple to be equal to one's spiritual master. Or if it's an advice on a practical level, like, should I get married or should I not? And should I get married to this girl? Is this the girl that I should get married from? And then you go to people who have some understanding of making relationships in terms of marriage, and you get advice from them. So there are books, there are persons who are qualified to give advice. It's up to you to seek that out and find such persons. And then if you have to make the final decision, at least you have enough information to work with, to which will help you make your choice.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Thank you.
Yeah, we should do that. There's many leaders who had what we say assistants that were very close to the leaders, and many times these leaders would ask their assistants what to do. When Krishna was asked a question at the assembly in Dwarka, rather than answering the question, he opted to Uddhava, and he asked Uddhava, give the answer, give the solution. And Uddhava gave the perfect solution. So Krishna just didn't ask anybody. He asked one he felt knew the answer that they would needed to. That's a long story. I'm not going into the details, but even Krishna took advice from others.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bindu Mataji?
Prabhuji, did you take my name?
Yes.
Okay. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Such an amazing part of Ramayana. I felt like nectar was coming my way. So grateful to
Thank
be
you.
part of this. There were two things that stood out. Very interesting. The term you use, sophistry. Of course, we know the technical term of it, but using bits and pieces of information and then reconstructing a narrative. That's what you mentioned, right? When you were talking about Mandara. It's so interesting that is so prevalent now everywhere. They take bits and pieces of information and then they completely create a new narrative. And the harder part is to decipher, like Kaikeyi, what is true, what is not. She yielded to it. Maybe someone as wise as Kaushalya would not have yielded to it. So my question is, how do we sort of separate ourselves? And so much of Maya is thrown at us.
Well, I think you should beware when someone gives advice. Where is it coming from? What's the authority behind it? Who's the person that are speaking? What is their motivation?
Sometimes
Consider
these come from our own so-called loved ones. So
Mm.
that's, I guess, the biggest challenge.
Well, loved ones, basically family members, want to keep you on the bodily platform. And that's what they usually do. And so it's all about your well-being on the bodily platform. And that may be just, what you need to hear, but in many cases, it may be contrary to your spiritual practice. So therefore, you have to make that, distinction between, is it beneficial for my spiritual life or not? Will it impede my spiritual life or will it help my spiritual life? So we keep spiritual life as foremost, and we keep material needs as important. But as they say, if you take the material and give up the spiritual, eventually you lose both, because material cannot stand the test of time. It always changes. Where spiritual is eternal and it's always expanding, always becoming more, always becoming greater. So, if you're not sure, get advice. But if you have that ability, you can distinguish. Well, how will I benefit from this? A little foresight is needed, and a little trust is also needed. Because when you take advice, you have to really much trust the people who are giving advice. If they are, if they have a good track record, you might say, of giving advice, that would be one way to accept things. But if their advice in the past has not proven to be beneficial for others or even yourself, you may be hesitant to accept the advice.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Yeah, life, Prabhupada says, you have to practice Krishna consciousness, you have to be intelligent. Not everything is handed to you. We have the tools, and now we have to make those tools work by using our intelligence and using other sources to help us gain the understanding. It's not always easy. Nothing is handed to you. Many times you have to. A lot of times people ask questions and they want answers directly based on their problems. The problems are not solved by giving answers. Problems are solved by giving the intelligence by which they can find the tools to use to solve their problems. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that is why sadhana, Hare Krishna sadhana is so important, right? So that we can actually maybe build a little bit of wisdom to understand who is saying what.
Yeah, and your sadhana will be the foundation to help you make decisions. Chanting of the holy name expands itself out in all areas of life and then activates our intelligence by which we can face the different challenges and decisions throughout the day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Nice question.
Thank you, Maharaj. Mayuri, she wants to ask.
Hare Krishna Maharaji. First of all, what a beautiful narration of Ramayana. It was truly inspiring and felt very, very divine. So, thank you for doing that for all of us today. So, as you were telling about Kekai, when she asked Lord Dashrath to send Lord Ram to exile. And I was thinking about this that Lord Ram probably knew that it was unfair, but still he upheld his father's promise. And I was trying to relate it to this modern society where we all live in. And it's very fast paced and materialistic. And I was thinking when people often break their commitments and their promises, then how can we follow the same level of truthfulness that Lord Ram did to his father?
When people break their promises, you're saying?
Yes, because Lord Dashrath had made the promise to Kekai that he would send Lord Ram to exile, and even though Lord Ram knew that it was not fair, he still upheld his father's promise that he had made to Kekai. So I was wanting to ask from you, like, if we relate it to the modern society that we all live in, how can we, when people break their promises, how can we uphold the same level of truthfulness?
It becomes difficult because many times what promise they make and then they break it affects you, and that will change the situation around. So then it depends again on the situation, the person, and the level of what the severity of the activities that you're dealing with. So I would think sometimes you may not be able to fulfill your part when they break their promise, because ultimately they don't allow you to fulfill your part because they didn't fulfill their part. So you become automatically victimized by their decision, and therefore you can't go ahead with your part. And there may not be any reason for you to go ahead anyway, since they broke it in the first place. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are examples of both. I remember when I was in New York Temple, I met one devotee who's now he's a senior devotee in ISKCON. We became friends. And after meeting and becoming friends, we both decided we're going to go to New Vrindavan and join the movement there. So we made plans to meet in New York City in Port Authority bus station and take a bus to New Vrindavan that upcoming Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I got there before 10, but he never showed up. And so I was thinking, I waited, and I thinking, should I go without him or not go without him? So I waited to 6 o'clock in that evening. There were many buses, and then I finally decided to go anyway. And he never came. But later on, he came many years later, and we spoke, and he gave me the reasons why he didn't show up, because of circumstances came up in his life where he couldn't leave. He had too many attachments to deal with in New York, and so he was apologetic, at the same time a little bit remorseful for not fulfilling that desire at the same time. But he did come later. So that was a situation. So I had to make a decision to go with him or without him, and I decided to fulfill my own desire to go. And I did. And I'm glad I did, of course. So, but you might say his decision didn't affect me so much. But in certain cases, when someone does break their promise, you can't fulfill your promise because it depends on two people, just like in marriage life. You know, if the woman is not serving the man nicely and the man is not serving the wife nicely, if one is serving and one is not serving, then the relationship will start to fall apart automatically. So both in certain relationships, everyone has to come up to their duty. They have to do their duty as being responsible to each other and to the goal that you're trying to achieve. So it might be different from situation to situation. If someone's trying to cheat you, then you shouldn't allow them to cheat you, even though you made a promise to do something, and by doing something, you'll be cheated. But if you see someone's cheating you, then you cannot go ahead with your own promise, because you can't allow someone to cheat you in the name of fulfilling your own promise. That's one thing. We should not allow other peoples to cheat us, because we're offending both them by allowing them to cheat us, and we're offending ourselves by allowing ourselves to be cheated. So that can be something we consider before we fulfill our part when they don't fulfill their part. Am I going to be cheated?
Very true. Very beautifully explained. Thank you, Maharajji.
Yeah. Yeah, Prabhupada said many times, he said, when you deal with cheaters, you have to cheat. Of course, we shouldn't. That's circumstance, of course. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Yes, Maharaj. Lavanya Mataji, she wants to.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Thank you for the wonderful class today, Maharaj. On an Ekadashi, to hear these words from you is actually, I consider myself, very, very, blessed. And my question is, Maharaj, we hear that, it's Maya Sita who was with Ravan, right? When Ravan kidnapped her. So I just wanted to know, what is the purpose of having a Maya Sita when we all know that, she is Sita Devi. She is a potency of Lord Ram, right, herself? So even if someone wishes to, they would not even touch her. So I was just thinking, what is the reason behind having Maya Sita over there?
Well, Maya Sita was Vegavati. Vegavati was a person who approached Ram earlier in life and asked Ram to accept her as his wife. But in this, Ram responded, Ekapatni, that in this incarnation, one wife. So, in order to fulfill Vegavati's desire to become the wife of Ram, she became the Maya Sita. The real Sita was never touched by Ram because it's explained that in material can't, a materialist person cannot pollute the Supreme Lord and his internal energy. It's not possible. So that Maya Sita was Vegavati. That's explained in the very beginning of the Ramayana. If you read Krishna Dharma's version of the Ramayana, in the very beginning he explains Vegavati.
Thank you, Maharaj. Glad to know this. I'll just go through this. Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj, for the clarification.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai Ho.
Varshik Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you so much for the amazing lecture. It was so amazing to hear the entire narration of Ramayana in one go. And we were like tuned in. It was very difficult to get distracted. Thank you so much. I had one question about uh, like the part where you mentioned about the contribution of Hanuman and also the contribution of the squirrel in making of the bridge. So Lord Ram equally valued both of their contribution, though in terms of quantity it may look very different, but both of them were putting their best. So in our own lives, with so many other responsibilities also going on, of course, we want to see everything in line with Krishna consciousness, but sometimes it becomes challenging to determine whether we are putting our best or is there like more to do. So because sometimes like our mind keeps telling that, oh, we should not do more, otherwise our other responsibilities will be affected. Or if sometimes we do, we should do more, but then it might not actually be favorable for us to take that step at that point. So what is the best way we can make the decision to like go ahead or be consistent with what you're doing right now so that we can be more sustainable? So I just wanted to know from your
Yeah.
experience.
Well, there's two ways of doing more. One is quantity and the other is quality. I think you were speaking about doing more in terms of quantity, but quality is also doing more, thinking how to do whatever we're doing with more devotion, more attention, more quality. In other words, just say you're dressing, how to do it even nicer, how to make it even more, make the deity look even more attractive. So quality actually is bhakti, thinking how to make it better. If you're giving a class, then you think how to give the best class. If you're thinking how to absorb yourself in hearing a class, use your ability to stay fixed on the sound that is being given in the form of transcendental knowledge. In other words, try to increase quality by adding something to what you're doing, by doing better according to what you're doing. In other words, think in terms of quality. And that way you won't have to say, well, if I do more, then I won't have time for other things. No, you don't have to do more. Just do better in what you're doing. That's all. Chant better rounds. Get more out of the reading when you read the books by concentrating, by using certain principles to help bring about concentration and retention of knowledge. So, yeah, everything can be qualitized even better, whatever we're doing. We should think like that.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. It helps a lot. think this is a direction I'll try to look into.
Yeah. Think in terms of quality, not so much in terms of quantity. If quantity can be done, fine. If it can't, then by increasing quality, you're increasing your bhakti, actually.
Nice, thank you. Here, Mataji, or here? She put her question in the chat. She said, the Lord can kill Ravana and other demons by his thought alone, sitting in his dham. So why does he incarnate, go through all these human difficulties?
For our benefit. For instance, I'll give you an example. When devotees were asking Srila Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya, he came and he spread Krishna consciousness throughout the whole subcontinent of India. Prabhupada was speaking that way, how Lord traveled the whole subcontinent of India and spread Krishna consciousness everywhere. And so the devotees asked Prabhupada, well, since Lord Chaitanya was here, why didn't he just take it around the world? And Prabhupada said, no, he left it for me to do. He wanted to give me the credit. So the Lord is including millions of monkeys, other personalities in his pastimes, so they can also become purified, benefited, and develop their love for the Lord more. So he's attracting others to him in his pastimes.
Indira?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the class. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask this for this class, but I was hearing your talk at another time with another person, and in one of in that discussion at one point you mentioned that we could actually, if we don't have any taste for chanting, then we can develop that taste by serving Vaishnavas. And I was thinking that, like, someone who's a true Vaishnava, like, you'd have to have, it's a very rare birth, right? Like, you have to have, to be a Vaishnava, there are 26 qualities you must have. And it seems to be very rare. So I was thinking, in that condition, how would you serve Vaishnavas? Or, because they're not so, like, often found. They're rare.
But they are. They're there. These personalities are there. Just look around. You'll find devotees who are fixed in Krishna consciousness. One who is fixed in devotional service, who has no other occupation, is considered to be a sadhu. And the scriptures mention, what is that verse from the Bhagavatam? Sususha Sharadanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Shanayad Seva Vipa Punya Tirtana Sevanat. By serving great souls, great services offered, and by such service, one gets an affinity to hear the message of Vasudeva. So by serving the spiritual master, by serving persons who are fixed in devotional service, this pleases the Lord, and by that the Lord bestows his mercy on such persons. And that mercy comes in helping us in executing devotional service. In other words, we get more of a taste for chanting. We get more desire to chant. All of these are due to serving great personalities. Or persons, you might say, those who are actually great are those who are fixed in devotional service. It may be the cook in the temple, or it may be someone who is, traveling around preaching in different places around the world. A great personality is not so much not the service they have, but it's the consciousness they have. What is that consciousness? That they see, they they focus on devotional service as the only goal in their activity. So look for such persons. You'll find them. They're there. They're in Chicago. They're in Naperville. They're everywhere.
Thank you, Maharaj. I also had a follow-up, if that's okay. Is there a
Yeah.
way to serve Vaishnavas who are like not there in this world? Like, is there a way to serve Vaishnavas? Is there a way of serving them that is not physical? Like,
Yeah, by following their instructions. Learn what they had said and then carry it out. And that's serving them. Serving the instruction is serving the person.
thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah. Yeah. What they say is non-different than what they are. So therefore, when you serve their instructions, you're serving them. They make their instructions available for us, for our benefit. That's their service, to give us mercy. Now they're no longer present, but they leave themselves in the form of their instructions. Does that help?
Yes, Maharaj. Yes, serving their listening to their instructions, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
Ishil.
Gopal, how are we doing?
Yes, Maharaj. Actually, it's so nectarian. We don't want to stop, and the questions keep coming. I think this may be the last question that Ishil has, if you have time, Maharaj, or otherwise we can end here.
Is there more than one question coming?
As far as I can see, this is the last one, Maharaj.
Okay.
Ishil, would you like to speak your question, or should I read it?
Yes, Prabhu, I could speak it. Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble, respectful obeisances. I've read on the internet that Queen Kaikia had asked Lord Ram to be his maternal mother in his next life. And the Lord responded that he already gave that promise to someone else, which is why Kaikia was born as Mother Yashoda instead of Mother Devaki in her next life. Will this be true in our tradition?
I have no such knowledge of that. And where did you read that from?
I do not remember, but it was a long time ago on the internet somewhere.
Well, things on the internet are not always foundational or actually clear. So yeah, I can't comment on that because I have no knowledge on that. And it's really not so important anyway. How will that help us in our devotional service? Really, not really much. So if you are really determined to know, then you need to do further research and see what you find.
I understand. Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Gopal. How did we do?
Thank you very much. Maharaj, I just wanted to mention like some of the points that I learned and that you made were so powerful. For example, you said the power of bad association, how that association affects us so deeply, and in the reverse, the power of good association, how that can uplift us. And I feel this session today with you is the power of good association, that we all just feel so uplifted. You also mentioned how Lord Ram was attached to the service, not the position, which is so amazing. Like, just these points, when we read the Ramayana, we never think about them, but you're teaching us so deeply through your example and through your precept. You are teaching us so nicely. And then also you spoke about reversals, how Lord Ram takes those reversals in the right spirit, and that leads to such a great benefit. So whatever reversals come in our life, if we take that in the right spirit, then that's so nice. and how Lord Hanuman perceived also through so many obstacles, and he surpassed them by the strength of his devotion. And the main thing being the name of the Lord, that how that was very deeply, it affected me, how until they were taking or writing the name of the Lord, the stones wouldn't float. And when they started writing the name of the Lord, then the stones would float. Similarly, you were telling us how any service that we want to do for Krishna, it's dependent on our chanting of the holy name. If we chant nicely, then we can fulfill that service.
Yeah. Thank you for orchestrating this wonderful Sangha. I felt really blessed to have you there, knowing that your presence there were making everything easy in terms of giving your blessings to this whole program. So I felt when we say, I felt protected by your presence.
Maharaj, your guidance and your inspiration is so invaluable always. And we would really love to do this regularly. And it's amazing how much, how many devotees came and how much they enjoyed it. So by your permission and request, I'll be contacting you again so we can do it regularly.
Good. Yeah. Thank you. I also wanted to speak to you on one other subject matter. So maybe when we end the call, we can make a quick phone call. I just need to ask some personal questions related to my travels in America.
Yes, Maharaj. I'll call you right after this. Yes, Maharaj.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you all devotees for coming on and making this dialogue what it was.
Thank you, Maharaj.
The glories
Thank you,
of
Maharaj.
Sri Ram.
Let's offer our
Thank you
obeisances.
so
Thank
much.
you, Maharaj.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much,
much.
Maharaj.
Maharaj.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Maharaj.
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Looking
Maharaj.
forward to see you.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai. Hare
Chandramauli
Krishna.
Swami Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
Jai Krishna
Hare
Maharaj.
Chandramauli
Krishna.
Maharaj ki
Srila
jai.
Jai.
Prabhupada.
Hari bol, Hari bol, Hari bol.
Jai Sri Ram.
Jai Shri
Jai
Ram.
Jai
Shri
Shri
Ram.
Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.
Thank you, Mahaprabhu. Thank you.
Thank you,
Hari
Maharaj.
Hari.